1943. The Battle of the Atlantic is approaching a climax. Allied convoys are given the most important mission yet. They must transport the weapons and men needed for the invasion of Europe. D-Day. To stop the convoys, Germany invents new weapons and new submarines.
There's always measure and countermeasure.
Your machine against the other machine.
It's a desperate fight to stop the largest invasion in history. Spring 1943. German U-boats are sinking up to 110 Allied ships each month. The German submarine attacks are masterminded by Karl Dönitz. In January, Adolf Hitler promoted him to Admiral of the entire German Navy. Dönitz has 400 U-boats under his command. Now he plots bigger, more deadly attacks.
It would be impossible to avoid the wolf packs. They would be everywhere, and all convoys would be attacked.
In April, he launches 53 U-boats to mount the biggest wolf pack attack of the war. Over 2,300 men are sent into battle. Among them, his 24-year-old son, Peter. The Admiral's next target, a slow-moving convoy leaving Britain, codenamed ONS-5. On April the 22nd, its 43 rusting merchant ships head out for Halifax. Most are empty. They will pick up weapons and cargo, many of them needed for the preparations for D-Day. But they travel at a paltry 7.5 knots. Easy prey for the U-boats. One of the seamen working aboard the convoy is a 28-year-old Englishman named Cyril Hill. He's a gunner on loan from the Royal Navy.
Somebody, in his wisdom, has decided that a merchant ship should have some means of self-defense.
Prepare to attack.
Guns ready.
Our job was to man the defensive equipment, to use it if it came to it.
Submarine.
But the convoy will also be accompanied by 12 extra escort ships, double the normal protection. Each ship is equipped with the latest radar and weapons for fighting submarines. This almost empty convoy is about to make history as it takes on the biggest wolf pack of World War II. The convoy is shadowed by aircraft from Ireland and Iceland, equipped with radar for spotting U-boats.
The aeroplanes put the U-boat under the water. Even if the U-boat isn't seen by the airplane, the U-boat will see the plane, it will dive. It's not an effective weapon.
U-boats need to travel on the surface to make their best speed, so airplanes are a major problem. But there is a vast area of the Atlantic normal airplanes cannot reach. It's called the air gap. For over 1,600 kilometers, convoys must travel without air cover. A slow convoy like ONS-5 will be on its own for up to 5 days. The air gap is the U-boat's favorite hunting ground.
In the air gap, the U-boats can operate on the surface, they get much greater visibility, they can move much faster.
In early May, after a week and a half at sea, the convoy enters the air gap, where the U-boat wolf pack is waiting. But before they can attack, a ferocious Force 10 gale closes in.
waves coming in would be much bigger than the ship.
The U-boats dive 60 meters to avoid the storm.
And of course, whilst the weather was bad, the U-boats didn't. So as soon as the weather cooled off a bit, that's when the U-boats started.
It takes 3 days for the storm to finally pass. In Berlin, Dönitz coordinates the attack by radio. He orders his captains to strike hard.
Do not hold back. Something can and must be achieved.
The U-boats outnumber the escorts 6 to 1, but they must strike while the convoy is still in the air gap. The Allies can tell from the U-boat radio traffic that the attack is imminent. But 4 of the convoy's 12 escort ships are running low on fuel, thanks to the long journey through the storm. They must leave. New escorts are on the way. But for now, convoy ONS-5 is underprotected and surrounded. Realizing the convoy's plight, a Royal Canadian Air Force Catalina is scrambled from its base in Newfoundland.
They've actually taken their Catalina aircraft and thrown out all the excess kit. They stripped out all the machine guns, they stripped out the self-sealing fuel tanks.
With less weight, the plane can now fly further on a tank of gas. After 7.5 hours, the Catalina spots ONS-5. 6 ships have fallen behind. The U-boats close in for the kill. The Canadian Catalina targets one of the subs. It dives in a desperate attempt to escape. But the Catalina drops 4 depth charges. The U-boat vanishes, too damaged to fight. But 52 subs remain in the hunt. The Catalina flies back to base. The U-boats target one of the ships in the main convoy. It's the Harperley.
We shot up to the gun and cleared away the 4-inch gun, ready for action.
But it is too late.
We were hit by 2 torpedoes, one in the engine room and one in the forward hold. Some of the other chaps were just plain panicked, I think. They really were.
As the Harperley crumbles, Hill finds himself on the deck of the sinking ship.
I was too busy to be afraid.
He helps lower a lifeboat.
Then the boat just drifted away from the ship. The ship was sinking, and the lowest man on the scrambling deck got washed away by the sea. So I called 2 of my blokes up onto the deck, and we sat down and lit up cigarettes and just waited for the end. I mean, that was it. And then the boat came drifting toward us, and I yelled out to the others, "Come on, we got a chance," and we ran, and I took a diving leap. And I was lucky I managed to get there.
The Harperley is not alone.
Los! Los!
9 other Allied ships are sunk before sunset.
Los!
Back in Germany, Dönitz celebrates. The giant wolf packs are working perfectly. As night approaches, the convoy can expect more attacks from U-boats hiding in the dark. But once again, nature intervenes. A dense fog rolls in. The U-boats can't see their targets. Dönitz orders them to stay on the surface to continue the attack. Unlike these U-boats, the Allied escorts have radar. They can now target U-boats lost in the fog. The hunters become the hunted.
In a pea soup fall, there's a carnage of U-boats that takes place. There's about 5 that are lost fairly quickly. In fact, there's so many U-boats around ONS-5 that 2 of them collide and they both sink.
Desperate to escape gunfire from Allied ships, U-boats dive for safety.
Picture you are a 20-year-old guy, and you're sitting there 600 feet below the water, and you're under attack. And there was nothing I can do about it. I couldn't run, I couldn't duck, I just had to sit there and take it.
Five more Allied escorts arrive and join in the battle. Over the next 2 days, the Allies sink 6 U-boats, and 4 or 5 limp home. It is a turning point in the war. The carnage proves that Allied escorts equipped with anti-submarine technology can not only protect the convoys, but they can also inflict massive damage on the U-boats.
National Geographic לוקח...
The breakthrough in the battle for the Atlantic comes just in time. US President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill decide on an invasion of Europe that will require over 1 million men and 16 million tons of weapons. Most will come from America. But for the convoys to succeed, the Allies will have to win the battle for the air gap, the U-boat's favorite hunting ground. The Americans provide the answer. The B-24 long-range bomber. It has a range of over 3,200 kilometers, enough to wipe out the air gap completely. In May 1943, some 50 liberators now fly from air bases in Iceland, Ireland, and Newfoundland. For the first time in the war, the U-boats have no place to hide in the North Atlantic. Royal Air Force pilot Terry Bullock, a U-boat hunting ace, flew B-24s to help close the air gap.
I was quite lucky. I spotted 28 U-boats, attacked 19, but only sank 4, and that was hard work.
The U-boats find themselves under siege. For Admiral Dönitz, it is nothing short of a disaster.
By May 22nd, we had already lost 31 U-boats since the first of the month, a frightful total, which came as a hard and unexpected blow.
The slaughter will be remembered as Black May. Some 1,800 men lose their lives in U-boats. Among them, the Admiral's son, Peter. On May the 24th, Karl Dönitz realizes that such losses cannot be sustained. He orders all his surviving U-boats to return to base.
In June 1943, I was faced with the most difficult decision of the war. I had to make up my mind whether to withdraw the boats from all areas and call off the U-boat war, or let them continue operating regardless of the enemy's superiority.
Dönitz agrees to upgrade his U-boat fleet. He accepts advice from German engineers to substantially alter his U-boat. He approves plans for a more advanced U-boat. It can stay underwater for weeks, safe from airplanes and radar. The U-boat fleet will also soon be armed with new kinds of torpedoes. But new technology takes time. So Dönitz looks for safer battlegrounds for his U-boats. He orders them into the middle of the Atlantic, one of the few places the American long-range bombers cannot reach. Here they will target American convoys. They are carrying weapons and soldiers for the invasion of Sicily, an early prelude to the D-Day landings. U-boat crews enjoy sunny weather and balmy temperatures, a welcome change from the cold weather of the northern convoy routes. Walter Wittig served on board U-518 in the summer of 1943.
On the voyage to the Caribbean, there was nothing happening.
But once again, the Allies outsmart Dönitz. No longer content to defend convoys, Allied forces now actively set out for the kill. The Americans establish hunter-killer groups. One aircraft carrier and up to 8 destroyers. Their task is to hunt down U-boats and destroy them. But the carriers are highly prized targets for U-boat commanders. With just a few torpedoes, they can sink a large aircraft carrier and the planes it carries.
And there were a lot of planes there, and we couldn't even surface during the day. We had to stay underwater the whole time.
But U-boats still have to surface regularly to charge their batteries, and it is risky. U-boat radio operators transmit their position to Dönitz in Germany using codes from the Enigma machine. Neither Dönitz nor his crews realize these messages are being decoded by the Americans.
We would receive a message every night from Washington. Because they'd broken the code, we could tell where they were, and then they would send us out to the location and hunt them down.
It gives the American Navy a deadly element of surprise. Walter Wittig's U-boat discovers this firsthand near the Azores Islands. The U-boat has arranged a meeting with a supply ship.
We were surprised that exactly at the meeting point where we were supposed to have met him, there was an American carrier.
The U-boat is soon surrounded by 4 destroyers.
And that was a sign for us that they seemed to know what we were saying. They knew what was going on, either by listening to our wireless or through the trail.
U-518 dives as quickly as possible as the American hunter-killer group closes in. To locate diving U-boats, American sonar operators employ sound waves.
As soon as we got the contact, well, we'd go to general quarters and we would proceed on a pre-planned attack. And I would call the stern and they would open up the end gate and drop probably 5, 10, 15 depth charges.
When depth charges explode, the water reverberates with sound, often disabling sonar for a few seconds. Each side listens for the other.
When on board, you were not allowed to do a thing, not a sound. Everything had to be quiet. There is no movement. So when you're underwater, you can easily hear the ships and vessels above, without even a hearing device. I had at that time a wrapped-up pistol lying in the radio room. I was afraid of suffocating or drowning, and I said to myself, if it comes to that, then you use the pistol.
But heavy seas forced the American hunter-killer group to abandon the hunt.
And the sea was so rough up above that the search party couldn't do any more. We had to surface. But in the heavy sea, we were able to escape.
U-518 is lucky. 15 submarines are destroyed by the Americans in the summer of 1943. Dönitz had sent his U-boats to the central Atlantic, hoping to avoid airplanes. Now his crews find there is no escaping them. Outsmarted by American hunter-killer groups, the invasion of Sicily begins in July 1943 as planned, and is a success. Dönitz is running out of options and time. In August, Allied leaders travel to Quebec. Canadian Prime Minister Mackenzie King meets with President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill. They discuss when D-Day and the invasion of Europe should begin. Operation Overlord is set for spring 1944.
In due time, we shall communicate the secret information of the Quebec Conference to Germany, Italy, and Japan.
If D-Day is to succeed, convoys must carry 200,000 tons of weapons and cargo each month in the build-up to the invasion. Dönitz knows he must find a way to stop the convoys, or Germany will lose the war. Dönitz orders his U-boat crews to plan a return to the northern convoy routes. He hopes new technology now installed on the U-boats will help, but he knows there will be heavy casualties. His crews have always trusted their commander. Now they fear that they are being sent to almost certain death.
What we had to do before we left, pack up all our belongings into one specially made wooden box, seal it, address it to our nearest relatives. When our boat didn't come back, sent that box to the relatives with a little note, and case was closed.
Dönitz devises a new strategy. He orders his U-boats to target the armed escort ships, then attack vulnerable merchant ships. But the destroyers are difficult targets. Torpedoes are designed to hit merchant ships that sit deep in the water, providing a large target. But destroyers have shallow hulls, so traditional German torpedoes often slip beneath them and miss. German scientists come up with a technological breakthrough, the T5, an acoustic torpedo. It finds its target by homing in on the sound of the propeller. In September 1943, Dönitz sends his upgraded U-boats back against the North Atlantic convoys. Werner Herchmann is an engineer on U-190 and witnessed the acoustic torpedo in action.
And the commanding officer went to the surface, looked at the periscope, and saw this small warship approaching at a very high speed. That time decided to send an acoustic torpedo towards that approaching warship.
very, very difficult to avoid. You might be able to glance it a wee bit, but you can't turn a ship, especially if it's going at speed. You come around a great big archy curve. When you saw them, you were hit.
The acoustic torpedo is launched against 2 convoys in September of 1943, taking them completely by surprise. 3 escort vessels and 6 merchant ships are sunk. The acoustic torpedo is exactly what Dönitz has been looking for. But the German success is short-lived.
The people who developed the cure for the acoustic homing torpedo within hours of it first being used is the Canadian Navy.
Navy personnel realize that the Germans have deployed an acoustic torpedo. The Allies quickly find a way to counter it with a brilliant and inexpensive solution.
The countermeasure was kind of clever. What they did, what the ships did, they threw a buoy out over the stern and towed a noise-making buoy that rattled and towed it behind the ship. And the torpedo went for that damn thing that cost $20.
But some of the new German technology does work. Newer U-boats are equipped with stronger hulls to dive deeper and avoid depth charges. It is the only place they are safe from Allied attack. But the Allies haven't given up. They look for new ways to hunt U-boats that are more than 200 meters underwater. One answer is a new kind of depth charge. The Hedgehog. Launched from the bow with 24 bombs and 13 kilograms of explosives, it targets subs deeper than ever before. Among the newly equipped ships is the Canadian frigate, the Waskesiu. In February of 1944, it detects a hiding U-boat. Bruce Menzies is the ship's sonar operator.
We chased him for 5 to 6 hours.
U-257 is a veteran of the Battle of the Atlantic. It has been on the water since 1941. Now it is trying to dive deep to escape an attack.
Echo return contact. Bearing red 60, 1,500 yards. Echo
They'd be calling out, it's 1,400 yards. Let's get down to 12, 500. It's pinging, and then we're ready for action. You are all shook up. You're going, and don't say that you're not scared or you're not nervous, because you are. Then we brought in a Hedgehog.
But the new weapon misses. In order to detonate, Hedgehogs must make contact with their target. Now the crew readies the ship's depth charges. By 1944, many depth charges have extra weight and new detonators that allow them to sink deeper before exploding. The damaged U-boat is forced to surface. The crew abandon the sub.
And the captain of the sub, he came up on the conning tower when she was starting to really sink, and he took his life jacket off and he threw it to one of his crew that was in the water, and then he saluted him and he went down with the sub. And they all kind of saluted him back.
Only 19 men survived the attack. After controlling the Atlantic for over 3 years, in just 9 months, life expectancy aboard a German sub drops to 100 days. Spring 1944. As D-Day approaches, hundreds of thousands of soldiers are transported across the Atlantic to Britain, ready to mount the invasion of Europe. Some travel aboard luxury liners like the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary, where Frank Scanlon is a crew member.
On the Mary, we took over at least 10,000 troops at a time. Sometimes we even went to 15,000.
They don't need convoys for protection. With a top speed of 55 kilometers an hour, the big liners can easily outrun a submarine. None are lost to U-boats crossing the Atlantic. By May, over 1 million troops have gathered on the coast of Britain for Operation Overlord. Their safe arrival is a devastating defeat for Dönitz. After almost 5 years of warfare, he has lost the Battle of the Atlantic. In desperation, the Admiral turns to technology to turn the tide. He knows that his U-boat's greatest weakness is that they can only stay submerged for a few hours at a time. Their batteries run out quickly. So now he introduces a solution: the snorkel.
The snorkel is a mass that contains two pipes. One pipe is for the exhaust of the diesel engine. The other pipe is to draw in fresh air, to feed the diesels and also to recharge the systems.
With the snorkel, U-boats can travel below the water, almost invisible to radar and enemy planes.
I think the threat to the Allied landings in Normandy from U-boats was really substantial and quite real. The German submarine fleet would probably sacrifice itself in a kind of Wagnerian Gotterdammerung at the end. That they would just come in waves to try to decimate the Allied invasion fleet.
June the 6th, 1944, D-Day. Over 150,000 men begin the nearly 160-kilometer journey across the English Channel. No one is sure how many will make it to the other side.
On D-Day, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. We got the order to go.
Surrounded by 5,300 ships all firing rockets.
Everybody that day was shaken. There was no way out.
Dönitz is caught off guard. German intelligence has been fooled into thinking the invasion would land further northeast. He orders his men to report to their U-boats.
We got the news we have to go back to the channel.
I got a telegram. Report back to your station immediately.
Nobody was happy.
I think it was a sheer act of desperation, just to do something. To attack with taking any risk.
Invasion is on, and as a soldier, you know what that means. Hundreds of ships, planes all over the place.
36 U-boats set out on the most important mission of the war. The Admiral now orders his trusted crews to make the ultimate sacrifice for the survival of the Third Reich.
Every effort will be made to close the enemy invasion fleet, regardless of danger from shallow water, possible minefields, or anything else.
The Allies expect a U-boat attack. The first line of defense are airplanes, codenamed Operation Cork. As the invasion fleet approaches the beaches, 375 aircraft patrol the entire channel. Doug Harrington is a navigator on a Liberator bomber.
The idea was to block the channel by going backwards and forwards between England and France, and you'd have several Liberators on one box patrol.
A fleet of 36 U-boats sailed from the Bay of Biscay towards the channel entrance. Dönitz is counting on the new snorkels to defy Allied defenses.
as long as they were below the surface of the water, it was very difficult for anything in the way of radar to pick them up.
But 28 U-boats without snorkels have to travel on the surface. Using radar, Allied planes spot them easily. Ten are destroyed or damaged. The remaining 8 U-boats, fitted with snorkels, avoid detection by staying submerged. But as they approach the channel, they face another obstacle. Lines of warships.
The idea is cause the enemy to go through successive layers and force them to fight at a numerical disadvantage each time they penetrate one of those screens.
Many of the destroyers are Canadian ships from the Atlantic.
Our job was to go up the channel and block the channel off so that no subs could come through.
Submerged U-boats are bombarded by depth charges as they approach the channel entrance. By mid-morning, thousands of Allied troops are on French soil. On D-Day, none of the German U-boats have entered the channel. The Allies have applied 4 years of U-boat hunting experience to this one day, and won. $156,000 soldiers are now flooding into France, threatening the survival of the German Third Reich. But the invasion is just beginning. In the first week, hundreds of thousands of soldiers cross the channel. Dönitz still has time to cripple the invasion. In desperation, he orders snorkel boats from France and Norway to head for the English Channel. Over the next few weeks, a handful slip past Allied defenses. They succeed by traveling along the sea bed and the channel bottom. It is the perfect place to hide from Allied sonar.
There's too many things in the water. There's old boats in the water. There's all kinds of things. So you can't pick up a submarine because it's not going to happen.
U-767 heads for the channel entrance. On June the 18th, 5 British destroyers get lucky. They detect the sub using sonar. Walter Schmietenknopf is an electrician on board the damaged U-boat.
We got around 18 men in the back. And then the water slowly creeps up. My comrades were dead already. You hear them screaming a little bit. All I knew, the water was here to my mouth. And I knew the air is too thin. And there's the torpedo hatch. And then I was waiting. It is ages, maybe just a few minutes. Then I saw the hatch lifts, grabbed the latch, and I went out there. So I put my oxygen hole into my mouth and started breathing through the tank. So I came up very slowly, and then you see your life flashing around you. That's the worst part I ever experienced. It's not that you watch a film or a movie, it is real. It's real as we sit here now, every word you speak, from childhood on, everywhere you were, what you do in your life, whom you met, you know everything. You relive it, you can't explain it. Nobody else got out. I was the only survivor.
Few of the U-boats which tried to stop the invasion survived. Admiral Karl Dönitz has staked everything on his U-boat fleet and lost. Germany now faces a massive invasion of Allied troops, and Dönitz knows he is responsible. July 1944. As the Allied armies push back German forces on land, the U-boat fleet is also facing defeat. The Allies move into the Bay of Biscay. The U-boat ports are now surrounded. It is a devastating loss for Admiral Dönitz. His U-boat fleet no longer has direct access to the Atlantic or Allied convoys. Peter Peterson is an engineer on a German U-boat at sea in the summer of 1944.
While we were at sea, we were ordered not to return to France, but to go to Norway instead, after we finished our patrol, because the troops, the Allies, were moving toward our bases in southern France.
It now takes weeks for U-boats to reach the Atlantic from bases in Norway and Germany. But Dönitz has one last card to play. In 1945, he unveils a revolutionary new type of U-boat.
So Type 21 is the first real true submarine. It is designed, it is optimized for underwater performance. It's actually slower on the surface than it is submerged.
Dönitz hopes the new U-boats might still be able to change the course of the war. In early 1945, the most advanced submarine of the war is sent out to be tested in hostile waters.
I had a friend who was on it, and he says they were faster on the water, and you couldn't catch them. And he was into the Irish Sea, 45. And no enemy knew they were there, and we went out just in one piece.
2 prototypes are launched into battle in April 1945. But it is too late. On April the 30th, Adolf Hitler commits suicide. That afternoon, Karl Dönitz learns that Hitler has named him as his successor, the last Führer.
He's the most loyal man standing when Hitler blows his brains out. That's why he gets the job. He's the most Nazi of all the remaining Nazis.
For 6 years, Dönitz has craved absolute control of the U-boat fleet. Now that he has it, it is too late.
And about 340 miles southeast of Newfoundland, we got some garbled signals from Germany and telling us the war is over, that we should come to the surface, throw overboard all our ammunition, and tell the world who we are and where we are, and wait for further instructions.
On May the 8th, hostilities cease on land and sea.
And of Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender.
More than 100 U-boats emerge from the ocean depths, their swastikas replaced by black flags. Now even the Admiral surrenders. On May the 23rd, he presents himself to the Allies, confident he has done nothing wrong. Under the Admiral's command, the German U-boats have sunk 2,452 ships in the Atlantic, with the loss of over 30,000 merchant seamen. But Dönitz's crews also pay a high price. 28,000 are killed in action.
This is an organisation that took 75% fatal casualties. They got wiped out.
No other branch of the armed forces suffered such a high casualty rate. By war's end, the seemingly invincible U-boats were little more than death traps.
In some ways, the completely unwritten stories of the Atlantic War is the failure of German technology and innovation. The Allied side was quite willing to bring in anybody who had a potential solution. The Germans never fully integrate the lab coat with the uniform kind of side in the North Atlantic War, and the Western Allies do.
Karl Dönitz is tried at Nuremberg and found guilty of war crimes. He serves 10 years in jail and died on Christmas Eve, 1980. Today, the last survivors of the convoy battles are in their 80s and 90s. But the Battle of the Atlantic haunts them still.
I lost a lot of friends in the war. Friends I used to play with and, you know, socialize with.
Yes, of course, we wanted to win the war, that's clear. And I can imagine our opponents thought exactly the same thing. And they had exactly the same fear of death as we ourselves did.
You're quite sure in your own mind that you'll be all right. It's something that happens to other people, that.
I had so many near attacks that I think I had all the garden agents there were sitting on my shoulder because nothing hit me.
My one big achievement in life is that at the end of the war, the crew of my submarine and I myself were still alive.
Yes, there were friends that were lost. You still think about them. I've been to their graves. Yeah.